Have you ever experienced a moment in your life when you have felt like you have no control of things and you're just very overwhelmed because of a lot of things that are going on? And maybe you try your best to fix certain problems, and there have been times where you just get very overwhelmed. And so sometimes when that happens to us, we give in to stress and we give in to anxiety instead of just realizing that if I don't have control of something, then I shouldn't try to have control of it when it's impossible. And there are certain things that we can do to help ourselves not live in anxiety constantly and not worry about the things that are out of our control. The gospel today presents us with an example of a man who really was losing control of what was going on in his life, and specifically in somebody's life that he loved very much, the life of his son. Think about what this man probably would have done when he first experienced his son acting in a way that he was very confused by. Jumping into fire, jumping into water, doing things that he's probably never seen a human being do. And so the man probably tried to help his son himself. That's probably the first thing that any father would do. He would try to help. And then when that didn't work, probably he reached out to other people. He probably asked, what should I do? My son is dealing with this thing. Maybe he even went to a doctor, and nobody could help. And so probably he had heard about Jesus, that Jesus does miracles, and I'm going to take my son to him. And this was actually the moment when Jesus was gone for a few days, because if you remember the story of the Transfiguration, that's when this happened. Jesus was gone, and he only took a couple disciples with him, apostles. And so this man, he didn't have access to Jesus. He could not find him. And so he has enough faith to say that the next best thing is to go to the disciples of Jesus. And maybe they could do something. And when that didn't work, this man realized he has no control. He's tried everything, and nothing is working. And so what does he do? He does something that we can learn a lot from. He does something that will really, if we focus on what he did, and if we learn from this man and from the words of Jesus, we will have more peace in our lives. We will be able to surrender to God, and we will be able to have more faith. Because what this man did is he doesn't go up to Jesus and he doesn't tell him, hey, you have to heal my son. Hey, this is your fault. That's sometimes what we do. And it definitely shows a lack of faith. And it's not a proper way to treat God or to pray when we simply tell him what to do, when we simply blame him for things. That's not what this man did. Look at what he first did. Yes, he did tell Jesus what his problem was, but that's not the first thing he did. The first thing he did, notice what St. Matthew tells us. The first thing he did is he goes and he kneels before Jesus. He kneels before him. And that act right there shows that he knows who this is. He knows what he's capable of. And this man has already shown faith that he went to the disciples of Christ. And so he goes and he does this act of humility. He kneels, this act of worship. And that is his first gesture toward Jesus. And then the next thing he does is he doesn't start by saying what his problem is. He doesn't start by blaming Jesus. And again, because he knew who Jesus was, and he had the humility and the faith to approach him like that. The first thing he says is Lord. So he calls him Lord, and he says, Lord, have mercy on my son. Lord, have mercy on my son. And then he continues to explain what was wrong with his son. For he is an epileptic and he suffers terribly, and he doesn't even really know how to describe it. He doesn't say that he's possessed by a demon. But look at what is going on in this guy's life. He has no control, and not only does he have no control of what's going on, all of the people that he's asked to help him can't help him. And it's not only he that has no control, but it seems like, and it is the case, that the devil is in control of his son. at this moment. God knows how this happened, but that's what's going on. The devil was in control at this moment. And so what does he do? He goes to Jesus. Jesus, who is our God and our Creator, and who is the all-powerful one. He goes to him because he's realized he can't do anything. He is powerless in this case, and there's no point of trying and trying and trying. He realized, I have to go to Jesus now. He goes and he kneels before him, humbly asks him to have mercy on his son, and then, obviously, like we heard in the gospel, Jesus healed the boy with just one word. He rebuked him, and then the demon came out of him instantly. And then the disciples come to Jesus privately, and they asked him, why were we not able to heal him? And even the disciples kind of show a lack of faith. They are human beings, we know that. And thank God we know that most of them, obviously besides Judas, they stuck with Jesus, and they were strengthened by his grace and by his mercy, and they became the foundation of our church. But in this moment, they do show weakness, which should also be a sign for us that even if we show moments of weakness or a lack of faith, Jesus will still be there for us, and he will still give us the grace to persevere. But what does he say? Because of your little faith. Maybe they were trying to do it on their own power. Maybe they were trying to control what was going on. Maybe they said, oh, we've seen Jesus do this. We can do it too. But you can't do that without faith. You can't do it without Jesus. Bring him here to me. Jesus wanted them to realize this is not magic. You need faith, and you need me. We need him. We cannot do things on our own. And how do we accomplish that? How do we grow in our faith? How do we, if you're listening to this and maybe you're very overwhelmed with things in your life, maybe you have actually somebody in your life that you've tried to help but you cannot help. Maybe you've tried to get help for a person and you just can't. And maybe you want more faith in your life. How do you get to that point? Well, what does Jesus tell us about faith here in this gospel? After he says, because of your little faith, Jesus says, if you had faith as a grain of mustard seed, you would be able to say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. He's not necessarily telling the apostles that you have no faith, and if you had only a dot of faith, then you would be able to do these crazy miracles. But what Jesus is trying to show us is that faith is a living thing. Faith has to be in our hearts and it has to grow like how a seed grows. And the apostles are not just going to have more faith. We are not going to have more faith with just the snap of a finger. But how does a seed grow? The seed will need nourishment. The seed will need water, sunlight, and it will need these things daily. And that's why Jesus afterward, he says, this kind does not come out except by prayer and fasting. And so if we want to fight the devil, first of all, we have to realize we cannot fight on our own. Even if you gather all of the human beings in the world, we cannot beat the devil on our own. We can only beat him with Jesus. And Jesus has already beat the devil. He has already won victory for us. And now it's just about us sharing in his victory, growing with him, growing closer to him. Bring him here to me. How much longer are we going to stay further from him? Are we going to try to do things on our own instead of realizing how much we need Jesus? And how do we get closer to him? It starts with our daily habits, prayer and fasting. Prayer every day, knowing that we can grow closer to him with the help of his grace. We can have a relationship with him. Fasting means having discipline in my life, sacrificing things, sharing in his suffering, just like how St. Paul said in the letter that we heard. That's what our life is all about. It's about being with Christ in his suffering and in his death. And this is obviously something very hard to do. Nobody wants to suffer like that. And even St. Paul, he was a very strong man, and he was an amazing teacher of the faith. Even he says in the letter to the Philippians that we heard, he said, I know that I have to die with Christ so that I can share in his resurrection. He says, not that I have already obtained it. Even he knew that this is very hard and he's not there, but what does he say? I press on to make it my own because he has made me his own. I press on to make it my own because he has made me his own. That's ultimately what it's all about. That's what he wants us to realize. Jesus wants us to know that he is with us, that he loves us, and that he will give us his mercy and his grace and everything necessary that we need to surrender ourselves to him and to share in his victory over the devil so that we can be healed and so that our loved ones can also be healed and so that we can have the strength to be able to walk after him and be his disciples in our lives. Amen.